I'll go straight into English here, as we also said in the program. Otherwise, we're going to have this Camaloso thing going on, where I lose all of you in a second. You might have felt just a slight bit of tension here, and not just because I'm walking here saying nothing and you think, okay, has he lost it or something? The clicks on this is not a second, and it's not 2 seconds. It's just slightly less than 2 seconds, meaning you know what a second is. We're used to working with that. And since it's not arriving after a second, you get that tension. Had I done this like 2 seconds, you would fill in the gap. So this is a first example on how skilled listeners you all are. And some of you, without even knowing it, it's always slightly intimidating to be in crowds like this, because I know that there are many people here who knows quite a lot about audio. So this is more like not who knows who or who's right. It's about perspective. And in many cases, I see there's a perspective missing when we consider audio. First, a very short background. I come from music into some studio engineering, live sound engineering. So audio and sound has been a part of my life like forever. I was at a place once where I decided to go with my own company. So yes, I'm here with Fohhn, but actually I'm working with Fohhn out of my company ljudets. So directly translated to English, it's sound pleasure, and the other word, I think you get it actually. So when I decided to do that, I made myself a promise, and that could sound cheesy, but it's something I take very, very seriously. Do not start a company just to make money. You have to do something that makes a significant difference in a positive way to other people. And then I had to find out, what is that? What do I know? I know music, and I know about doing a rock concert. I could operate a studio once at least. So I had to figure something out. And I quickly realized it has to be something with sound. So I went that path and started to look into what is sound and how is it affecting us, and could I do something with this that actually could contribute to this positive difference in people's lives. And I quickly realized that definitely I can. So I have a goal here, and I think I'm pretty sure, confident at least, we'll reach it, that after this you will not listen to the world in the same way again. It will give you, hopefully, new perspectives. I see this clicker. That's a little bit annoying. So, what is sound? Well, you can define sound into kind of two groups. You have the natural sounds. So we have water, wind, and animals. That's what nature does when it comes to sound. Then we have the human beings, which are part of nature, but we invent and create things that are not entirely natural. So we started, especially with industrializing, creating a lot of sound. So just think about a car. You have the sound from the wheels, you have the brakes, you have the windshield, you have ton of sounds in just a single car, and then you can sum that up into a city, for example. Sound is probably the thing that affects you the most through a lifespan. And I'll get further into that as we get along and come up with some examples onto why that is. I hear this quite a lot. I wouldn't hear the difference, or I cannot hear the difference. That's wrong. You might not be aware of it, but you can. And you are very, very good at it because we are programmed to this. It's a part of our survival. So we are quite good listeners. Sound is a very, very fundamental thing for you. If you look at our alert system, sound is the thing. There's nothing that triggers so much release of hormones and stuff to kind of protect ourselves as sound does. Actually, if you look at when we were involved in Afghanistan, the Danish fighter pilots could fly up to 2 hours longer than some other pilots because we have 3D sound in the helmet. So just the fact that you take away that you have to, okay, there's a missile lock on your plane, then the message comes from here. So you don't have to process that information. That was enough to do the release. And it's also enough that those 2 seconds of reacting is between being in a bowl of fire or landing safely, of course. Sound is your primary sense out of our lower 5 senses. So you have sound, your hearing, and you have your sight, we have smell, and we have taste, and we have touch. So those are kind of the 5 lower senses, and they all affect each other. Our sensitivity is by far the highest on hearing, and I'll get again further deep into this. I would like to kind of try and prove my point here. So if I can ask you all to point at me where I'm standing, and I will actually just not take it completely away, but a little so that I'm not coming out of the speakers. So if you can, it's not polite to point, but you're allowed since I'm asking you. So if you could all point at me, and then I'll ask you to close your eyes. Don't worry, I'm not going to do any shitty or silly stuff. It's really difficult to get people to close their eyes. That's because we focus on sight, and that's wrong. That's what I'm about to tell you. So if you please close your eyes, all of you, and then you follow me when I start in a second to walk around, and we'll see what happens here. So we do a little kind of experiment. So I will walk around a little bit, and I will walk in different directions and so on, and then I ask you to open your eyes. Ta-da! Maybe I should have a magic show in Vegas. And you think, have I gone to the wrong presentation now? No, but think about it. Why did you point there? No one ever wants to. Because it's a trick question, you think. No, it's not. You pointed there because you could hear me standing there. But how can you hear that I'm standing there and not here? That's a point to prove how skilled listeners you actually are, because what happens is that while I move, of course you're moving your head along with me, but had you been looking straight, just to make the example more obvious, so I'm standing right in front of you, my audio here arrives to both of your ears at approximately the same time. I do this. Now we have a delay to one ear. So that slight shift in time, because the time has traveling time, of course, 3 milliseconds roughly per meter. So that change causes a phase shift. And you can hear the difference. And you're programmed to hear the difference. And you're programmed to analyze this movement like that. So once again, I cannot hear the difference. You can. You're quite good at it. That's impressive processing. And we don't think about it because we just take it for granted. If you're deaf on one ear, you would, of course, have a difference, but you would still hear it because it's not only the time difference between the ears and the arrival of sound. It's also how your ears are shaped. So when I'm moving, the audio will hit from a different angle. And that's another information that's being processed. So when I hit from a different angle, the tonality changes. That's why when we put on headphones, for example, we are disabling the outer ear, and it completely changes sound for us. So that's another part. Another part is actually the reflections of the room, because when you came in, you saw the room, you already have an idea on where everything is. And as I move here, the reflection from that wall to your ear changes. And as I get closer, it changes again. So it's a lot of information that's being processed instantly. So now I think we can agree that sound is important. And I talked about industrialization. So if we're walking in Paris, London, whatever, we have this constant traffic noise, and we have to kind of get over that to talk at all. So we're just getting louder and louder and louder, and we kind of started this vicious circle of just floating sound in, kind of sound pollution, you could say, and it has some quite significant consequences. In 2011, WHO did this paper where they looked into to how many life years are affected by traffic noise. So what they did was gather information from hospitals in Western Europe and information where they know where was this. They have geographical information on the patients too, and they know that the whatever disease is related to traffic noise. So that could be, for example, cardiovascular diseases, stress, which leads to often cardiovascular diseases, in the end, death. They put that into formulas and calculated it. And already in 2011, the result was that every year in Western Europe, I could give an example on it instead of just saying formulas. If you have, for example, Peter, he had stress, severe stress for 3 years, and then he had 3 years of moderate stress. That information was then put into these models to calculate how many healthy life years were lost for this particular person. The result is that we lose 1 million healthy life years every year in Western Europe and on traffic noise alone. So it's a pretty bad thing. Let's go a little bit deeper into what sound actually is to kind of keep building this understanding of it. A sound is air molecules under pressure. So pressure and release, the faster it goes, the higher the frequency. And that's what we know as bass and treble and mid. And you're hearing with the entire body. So it's not just your ears listening. So for example, low frequency, where we perceive the most, is just above our stomach. And it's called the Pacini system, which goes direct to our brain. I'll get back to that one also. So again, it is very, very fundamental. You're not just listening with the ears. You're listening with your entire body, because it's basically vibrations. And that affects us. And everything in this world is vibration. Nothing is standing still. Everything is moving in one way or the other. And that's a very, very important thing. And again, I'll get back to that. I'll go a little bit into how we prioritize, which is kind of the core of this, because I think we're wrong. I know it from the background in live music that when we were to do a festival or one-off concerts, first the lighting guys came in. They took a piece of the budget. That was already bad. Then tiny little bit left for us audio guys. Then we got LED screens. So now we had the lighting guys taking the most, then the LED screens taking 3 times as much as that, and hardly anything left to us. So who's humming the light show or the LED screen when you leave a concert? Just asking. So we prioritize in a wrong way. So I accidentally said this while doing the same presentation at Moskva Museum in Denmark and having 200, 250 of the sharpest brains in museum world sitting there listening. And I said, yeah, we are prioritizing all wrong. You know, at one point we invented writing and it all went to shit. Note to self, don't say that to a group of academics. That's very, very bad idea. You get hit immediately. No, but we have, it's our primary thing today, and what takes up the most of our resources, processing resources, is sight. That's where we focus. And we should also still focus on sight, definitely, but we need to prioritize. So, for example, architects, sometimes I think some of them are born completely without ears because it looks fantastic. You cannot use it for anything at all. So a classroom, white walls, and it's very clear. And this is a good example, actually. Listen to this room. It's a presentation room. What? Yeah. And when you're comparing these things, sight and your hearing, think again, you're hearing in 360 degrees. So there's a big difference here. You're taking a lot more in. If you put sight sensibility up against your visual range, then put it into a decibel scale, you would have from no light to as much light that makes it you can't see anymore. And for hearing, you go from 0 decibel up to, some say 140. I wouldn't say that because then you stop listening quite quickly, actually. But up to 130 decibels, so we're well above pain threshold here. So 1 to 90 for sight, 1 to 130 for your ears. And to comprehend the difference in this is a logarithmic scale, and you have a 40 decibel difference, so that's 10 to the power of 4, meaning you are 10,000 times as sensitive on your hearing compared to your sight. You would probably be able to find some scientist who says something different, but we are in a ballpark here where it's very, very clear that you are way more sensitive on your ears compared to your sight. And yet again, we focus on visuals, we focus on nice paintings, we spend money on the lamps. I did a church installation, and we were talking to one from the church, or we were going to do it, hopefully. And he said, yeah, I know we can get a speaker for 5,000 and so on. I said, shit, we are 230,000 already at budget for this one. This is not going to be good. It's going to be uphill. And then I looked up, and they have this beautiful, beautiful lamp. It's polished copper and just small strings, a ton of them going out, and it just looks amazing. I understand why they bought it, but priorities. So I asked the guy, what's the most important thing in church? And just like asking you, why could you hear me standing there? He wouldn't say anything because, of course, it's a trick question, he thinks. I said, is it spoken word? I said, yes, we can agree on that. Okay. Let me guess. You paid 250,000 Danish kroner for that. That's very precise, he said. So we were really close. Okay. And now you talk about 5,000 for a speaker system. We won it, actually, but it was a struggle. It wasn't just that easy. So a bit of the things just to create some interest in sound. So sounds amazing. I like that, and I like these are more for the fun examples. So I managed to become good friends with a quite famous sound engineer, big guy, long beard, very long hair, so long that over time it kind of slid down, so nothing here, but the rest landed down here. The guy, before he stopped, has been doing Metallica for more than 37 years live, and it's Big Mick. And he called me up. I was to go to a show in Royal Arena, and he called me up before the show and said, Morten, yeah, actually that's about dialect. That's a funny thing about sound. The first time I met Big Mick, I brought a couple of guys, of course, to try and sell a console. And we come in and we sit backstage in the dining area and so on, and Mick is sitting at another table and he sees us. And then he comes over, he gets up, oh, it's a Big Mick coming out. Pretty starstruck being a sound engineer because he's a bloody legend. And he comes over and he's just this massive motorcycle guy with the long hair and doing Metallica and thinking whiskey shots and, wow. Hi, Morten. I will just finish my dinner and I'll be right over. And that's a very good example on how sound can make your brain go pheesh, because it just didn't make any sense at all. No, but he called me up before the show in Royal Arena and he said, Morten, I just want to talk to you because I have something, you're going to love this. I can't say too much about it, but we'll bring some subs. You have to come. Okay, I'll come. So I went there and they brought some subs that could go down to 10 hertz at extreme power. And Royal Arena isn't that big. I think it's 12 to 40,000 seats in that arena. He put 48 of those subs in. So 12 in each corner. I said, what are you going to do with that? 10 hertz, you hardly have music down there. No, it's for some effects and so on. We are thinking some festival gimmick. Festival gimmick. I said, you're going to have a range of, again, the big motorcycle drivers just can 10 beers out there. Yep, they're going to spray paint the fence. And they played around with this sound thing and they couldn't get it to work because the sound effect, you're not used to working in that frequency area, so it didn't really work. And we were walking around and then suddenly his assistant Jay, he hit it. I have never experienced anything like it. 10 hertz like that, you can literally feel it. Every single vibration, you can actually differentiate it. We experienced even going outside the building, you sense it when they hit it. So they actually had engineers in the roof because it's a very technical, mechanical roof. So they were warned ahead because we are now getting close to earthquake. When you do that, earthquake actually goes 1 hertz, but we are so low that it can cause serious damage. But my point is, and I asked actually one guy from Maya Sound who did this, why do you create something like this? Because I don't see the business in it. No, we didn't pay for it. Of course you did. You built a subwoofer, you design it, you put hours into it, it costs money. No, we didn't pay for it. Why? Because NASA did. So, here's to the point. Long turnaround to get to that point, and just me telling her I know Big Mick. NASA did it because they put the capsule of a space shuttle into a big turbine, and they put massive speaker system down there, and they wanted to go lower in frequency. So that's why they wanted this sub. And what they do is that they blast the capsules with more than 141 decibels, like that, to kind of simulate both entering the Earth atmosphere. As they said, it's way cheaper to find a mistake down here than up there. So that's why they did it. Another example on sound and vibration, just to prove here that it goes in all sorts of directions. There was the most wanted person in the world. I guess you can almost figure out who that was. He was sitting in a house in Pakistan, and at least CIA was pretty sure he was sitting in a house in Pakistan. They have to be sure before sending in these special forces because it gets messy once you start that process. They had a lot of intel coming from different directions, of course, so they were pretty sure, but to be sure, there was a laser point from, it's very hard to get some, you would never get a solid statement from CIA on it, but it's coming now from so many sources, and my first hearing of it was actually from a Danish woman who's been working with hostage negotiations and so on and has good contact. So, but between 2.5 to 3 kilometers distance, they had a laser pointer to a window. You cannot see it, but that laser pointer will detect the vibrations on the window. And it's so precise that it could differentiate the different voices in the room. So in the end, by processing this information coming back, it senses the vibrations, and it says something about detail here. By that, they could say, we know who's going in and out, because they could monitor that. They have these things flying around with pretty good cameras. There was a person missing, and by analyzing this voice part missing, they were so sure that that was the final thing that make Obama push the button and say, go get him. And fortunately, they were right. Another impressive thing is dolphins, for example. See how they paralyze or even kill prey just by sound. Whales can communicate over thousands of kilometers, both because it's low frequency. It's not just this woo, which we normally hear, but they have very, very low frequency, and audio is traveling 4 times faster through water than through air. So thousands of kilometers. I talked about vibration. Everything is vibrating. Nothing is standing still. Everything consists of molecules. And everything has its own frequency. And that is something to respect. And now we're talking resonance. Here we have Tacoma Bridge in Oklahoma. Wind speed is 64 kilometers per hour. That's not even defined as storm. It's heavy wind, but not more than that. Unfortunately, the wind hitting this bridge and the wires and everything, it matched the own frequency of the bridge construction. Means it starts resonating, and that is self-generating once it starts. There is, unfortunately, another thing that makes it go so wrong. As you see now, it's slipping like this. And that's an engineering mistake, because in the beginning, the bridge was lifting equally, and the wind caught it under. So that you have changed the way you construct bridges that way. But from being a solid construction and then hitting the frequency, this happens. There's a reason soldiers is never march. Yes. Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, there are 2 things happening here. It's resonance. So the wind speed of 64 kilometers ended up matching the bridge's own frequency, and that generates resonance. So if you have a ship, for example, there will be a certain pace where you cannot keep the engine at that pace because it would match the specific frequency for the engine. And that self-generates and escalates, and it could literally tear the ship apart if you do it. And this is partly what happens here. So this started lifting the bridge. There's been a lot of discussions on what's right and wrong, but the conclusion is it starts lifting the bridge deck. Unfortunately, a bad construction also enabled the wind to catch the bridge underneath, and it made it kind of sway back and forth. There's a reason why soldiers isn't marching over a bridge in exact same tempo, because there's an example again from France where you had 400 soldiers passing over a very, very solid stone bridge, and it collapsed because, again, it matched the cell frequency. Millennium Bridge in London, they had to reconstruct parts of it. They knew it in advance that it would probably match our average tempo when walking. But you YouTube it, Millennium Bridge London, you see people standing like that. Because what happens is that we get afraid and insecure when it starts getting wobbly, and then we synchronize. And then it becomes really bad. So that it wasn't a good idea. But they reconstructed it, and no one was ever in danger actually on that bridge because they knew it in advance. So this thing about synchronizing is actually an interesting thing. The strongest frequency will always win. We synchronize the stuff. So if you hear music in a shopping mall, you synchronize to it. Your pace of walking, your heart rate, your breathing will synchronize. I'll give you an example here. Randomly started. Of course, if you set the metronomes in way different tempos, I would find it hard that it could force it into synchronizing. I'll skip it. I can hear it. And they just keep on going like this. And we'll skip a little bit more, otherwise we'll never get done. That's what happens. So when I talk further about how we synchronize in a shopping mall, it's correct. So I'll get into now a little bit about how sound affects us in three different ways: cognitive, psychologically, and physically. So cognitive is very, very important, of course, when it comes to work environment, for example, because it affects us heavily. We don't have much bandwidth for processing. We can process approximately 58 bits per second, and that includes hearing all of the 5 lower senses I mentioned. When I'm speaking to you now, that's about 40 bit. So you have 1.5 conversation, and your brain goes to do. You cannot focus anymore. So the most disturbing thing we can be exposed to is speech. It's important to keep in the back of the head here. I'll get back to it. So we are very limited, and you'll realize it immediately. I can go here and someone speaking there. It's extremely hard. Where am I going to focus? And it's not just because it's in Danish, that thing. As you hear it dropping, now your brain will ease again and you can start focusing on me. So this is a good example. I bet you can feel it very, very clearly what is happening. So that's the cognitive affection from sound on us. Sorry. Anyone sweating? Or at least elevated heart rate, maybe? What happened here, and this is my favorite part of what sound does to us, because now we're talking hormones. And this is interesting because it takes the magic and the blah blah and the voodoo out of everything. It's chemistry. Nothing less, nothing more. What happened here is that I release a massive shot of cortisol in your brain because you get scared. And this goes back to what I said about our sensibility to hearing, because it protects us. It's basically there for our survival. What happens here is your fight-flight hormone, cortisol, is released massively. That's what makes you able to react in really stressful situations very quickly, very rapidly, without thinking. I've tried it myself. Unfortunate situation, a guy dropped from 5th floor. In the shopping mall, we were doing a presentation for some PlayStation stuff and so on. And I was sitting on a stage. I thought it was aluminium cracking. It wasn't an aluminium crack, and it definitely wasn't pretty. But I was the first one there. And I've never thought a second about it, even turning a person, you can't do that and so on. But reactions were just, if you don't do it, it's going to die. If you do it, it's probably going to die. He's dying anyway. So everything was just like that. I actually saw a psychologist afterwards to kind of get it worked out. And she asked me one thing. What was the color of blood? I couldn't see it. Black. Still is. That's cortisol. And it remained keeping a block in the head. So it's a really powerful thing. It's very, very unhealthy. So I was also told you need to go running over a period here, because there are 2 ways you can get it out. You can go piss and you can go running. And that will relieve it, because it is bad. It's also the thing that's working for you when you have normal work stress, for example. It's a really bad thing, and you need to take that seriously. So sorry about that. It shouldn't be a dose that's actually life-threatening here. I'll immediately take you to something positive before I get really unpopular up here. So, you'll probably feel more relaxed now. And I'm playing with 2 senses here. The frequency of these waves coming in is approximately 12 wave hits per minute. And that's very, very close to your breathing rate when you're sleeping. So I'm physically playing with you. I'm also psychologically playing with you because this will make you think of vacation. So that's why from me hitting you with that annoying sound and your heart rate goes up, I can actually put your heart rate down, your breathing rate will drop. And also to go back to a former point, synchronization. You start syncing with this and it just happens automatically. Anyone still saying, I can't hear the difference? Guess not. If his feet weren't up out of the water, they are now, definitely. You had 1 second of something and immediately you know there's a shark somewhere. So that also proves a point to how quickly you process stuff, how quickly you fetch something from your memory, because it's actually a very, very old movie, but it's stuck in our heads. Even though it was pretty badly done, some of it. Actually, it wasn't. I saw some clips of it another day. It's not too bad, actually. I should see the whole movie soon. Another psychological and also physical thing, actually, is that birdsong is very, very good for us. I was just sitting on the porch the other day with my father-in-law, and we were talking about the birdsong. Oh, I just love it when I sit out. He's on pension now, and listen how you can actually hear how they are talking. You can define some kind of communication between there, and it just drags you into it. It is really healthy because you empty your brain, and we are also programmed to knowing that if the birds sing like this, everything is good. If the birds are singing like this, there's a lot of birds. That means it's a solid place for making a living. If they suddenly disappear, we would go back to the cortisol thing because you would react. Something's wrong, something's off. So you would immediately react to that. My favorite part, music. Music, when you react to this, when you like it, and maybe even feel goosebumps, is again hormones. It's a release of dopamine. The goosebumps is basically just dopamine. The reason you react to it is because you are incredibly good at foreseeing what's going to happen next in music. You can actually define chord progression, meaning how are the chords moving. That is why, to anyone who sells speaker systems, when someone tells you, I don't need a sub, it's just for background music in a restaurant, no, that's wrong. You need the subwoofers because you need the bass. The bass line is the most defining thing for a chord progression. And if it's not there, since I just told you, you're pretty good at foreseeing it, even though you're not aware of it, if the bass line is missing, you will be searching for it. So that means the hotel owner or whoever, his restaurant guests, will actually use a part of that very limited processing we have to start searching for what is this, even though they're not aware of it. And that's directly affecting how you're tasting the food you're served, actually. Because senses, as I also said previously, affect each other. If with 58 bits for all of them, and you overload one, it's going to affect the other. Had I put on pink noise here, I think you all know what pink noise is. Otherwise it says if you are exposed to solid pink noise while eating, there's scientific research stating that your ability to taste salt and sugar will go down, umami goes up. There's actually a complete table of which type of music will affect how you taste things. So basically, you could make the dessert in a restaurant sweeter without using extra sugar. Just play the right music. This would do it, actually. So you're very, very good at foreseeing those things. So it makes a difference that there's a sub. And this is a good track, actually. Now a little louder. It's not just chord progression, it's also movement. When something's a little off, it surprises you, it makes you feel good. So in a second, there's something that lifts and something is straight on. And I'll try to point it out. Right on. Right on. And tension. Build. Right on. Right on. That's the kind of things you see. You sense them immediately, even though you might not be aware of it. So when you are listening, there are other things in play also. If you start crying of music, it's not because you're a crybaby, it's a lactosin releasing. I've worked so much with this. I have particular songs, they can make me cry like this immediately. Small tiny things in a vocal, for example, do it. When we stand at a festival, you're standing with some, let's take the motorcycle guy. I have nothing against motorcycle guys, but we have one stereotype, let's call it that, who's standing with a young skinny guy. Normally, in any other situation in town, they were going out, saying you'll call him a faggot, whatever shitty thing to do. But at the festival, we all like this. It's just fantastic. That's oxytocin. That's a hormone created to make us feel combined. We use it actually, if you notice at a funeral, you sing a lot before the hard part of the funeral comes. And that's because then we are joined. It's much easier to go through what we're going to go through. And that's also what happens when we sing together. Where we also see this is during sex, especially orgasm. So it's actually a hormone created to secure our species' survival by reproducing. Tell that to the motorcycle guy was seen standing there. I guarantee you he'll go away immediately. It's also what happens breastfeeding. So when the mother has just given birth and gets the baby up and the first breastfeeding, you get that enormous release because that creates this unity between child and mother. Even though she, it's the most beautiful baby. No, they're often quite ugly actually, but this hormone makes it very, very clear that you don't just let it go. So there are all these things in play. I just encourage you to, instead of just Spotify listening, do conscious listening when you listen to music. Sit down, listen to a complete record. I found that getting back to vinyl is fantastic because you put it on and you sit and you end up listening to the entire thing. And there's a reason why every track comes like it does and so on. So I really encourage you to do that. It's very, very healthy for you. Anyone can tell me what that is? Yes. 1 second. I can't hear the difference anyway. Bullshit. You can. Hard Day's Night. Yeah, exactly. A Hard Day's Night. Again, 1 second. Think about the detail here. It's one chord. It's very special, that chord. There's a lot of writing about that particular chord. What is it? It is this one on top of this one and theory. I don't give a shit. I know what it is, and it's great. So, again, it proves the point. You're very good at listening. I'm running out of time here. Let's go a little bit into business very quickly here. So having all of the things I mentioned to you, the bandwidth, how we affect it, giving you examples, you could feel it yourself. This is something we need to take seriously. And you represent different businesses, some audio, some video, and something else. For the audio part, it's a very good idea to do something against this. One thing is behavior. Think about how you make noise, what your digital devices and so on, what is that generating, get it down. The next thing you could do is do some acoustic regulations. I'll quit the noise because it's annoying and it's expensive, because you get sick and your production rate goes down. It can be lowered by up to 70% when you're sitting in an environment like this. But then you could do acoustic regulations and you dampen everything. But what happens then? Speech intelligibility goes up. And what was the most disturbing thing for a human being? Speech. So What's the solution? There's not the solution, but it's a matter of behavior. It's a matter of understanding each other, realizing that we are good listeners even though we're not conscious about it. It's a matter of respecting when someone is annoyed or badly, negatively affected by something you do. It's not just something someone is too sensitive. It can be really really serious. If you have something like misophonia, for example, that's a hate of sound, and it can be very tiny sounds like the click of a pen, and there we're talking cortisol release in masses. And it's actually proven by brain scanning, so you can see it's an overreaction in the brain, and there's no cure. So when someone says, please don't chew an apple in the office, don't. Stop it immediately, because it's not, you can really be harming a person by doing it. So really consider, do I need to do that here? On the other hand, we also need to feel to ourselves, are we too sensitive? And not being to try to ignore it. So it's about talking together. And if you dampen the room, one thing you could do was introduce music. So I do it in nursing homes where we have done some projects. We dampen the room. It's citizens with dementia. By dampening the room, we increase the speech intelligibility, and they annoy each other like shit. So it can. It's a really really tough disease to watch. It's a very rewarding job when we have success, but it's very hard to be in. But we dampened the rooms and we introduced music. So we suddenly introduced something about memory. We lowered heart rate. We lowered your pulse of these citizens eating. We actually made them come out of their own rooms to eat while they got used to the music. Now we have the staff coming in during these dinner periods because of the relaxed music. So if they feel too much arousal, they go to these zones where the music is. So all of these positive effects, plus it just generates this kind of carpet over the speech. So we took away the speech intelligibility at the same time. We had the first feedback from one of the centers. Two of the staff said, this changed our lives. I said, yes, I can see that. I kind of expected that it would change your work life because we would introduce something positive. And they said, no, it changed our lives because the most stressful times during a workday is dinner time. And you completely took it away. So when we come home to the families, before we were tired, done, over, couldn't play with the kids, or at least it was hard to play with the kids, that's all gone. So it literally changed our lives. And that was probably the best day at the office for me. It was like, okay, we continue. The good thing is that it's very simple what we do. We have panels on the walls. We put good quality speakers. Guess what I'm using? I am using Fohhn speakers because they go low and we have the bass notes, and that's important. So it's a stereo setup. I put them in a far distance up to some corners. Is it musically reproductively correct? No. Is it working? Yes, because it becomes immersive. So it has an enormous positive effect on it. So that's one way to overcome it. So with that, I would say that was the words from me. Hope you enjoyed it. And as the last remarks, I will give you a hint on what you could improve at home. So when you do dinner and come home and you do, in Denmark we called it spaghetti or kødsovs. Not in my house, it's always spaghetti bolognese. And that's one thing, because that helps a little bit. The other thing is I put Italian music on. It will significantly increase your capabilities as a chef because it just tastes better. We have some discussions at times because it took me some time to find the right playlist. I really, really like to cook Indian food. And to get that playlist right, that that, that was quite tricky, but it's there. So you can get these playlists that's slightly Western orientated. Um, I need to turn that track a little bit down. You could find the right one. That's better. Slightly Western orientated. Then it works perfectly because you use music to trigger something. Traditional Indian music, you wouldn't like it, you're not used to it, you can't foresee it, it's strange. We had the same with Middle East influence. If you just go back 10, 15 years, you really didn't like it because you have these quarter note scales, and we are just not used to it. Try to notice today, when you listen to modern pop music, especially electronic music, how much influence there is from Middle East. And today, I'll bet if you listen to it, you're not thinking, oh, I don't like this, and oh, it's the. You are almost smelling the herbs and imagining you're sitting there, desert-like, with the sun going down. We got used to it, and now we can foresee it, and now we enjoy it. And why we really enjoy it is that it surprises us, which increases the release of dopamine. So find the right playlists at home and make dinner much, much better. And it hides the ones eating like, I really hate that. So thanks a lot for listening. Sorry for taking 10 minutes extra.